Right, so we've all been following this whole will they, won't they between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk over the last few months, and it's finally looking like they may square off at Wembley Stadium on April the 29th. My social media pages have been flooded over the last few days of the back and forth between these two men, and it's mad to think that back in the day, boxing fans could not give a fuck about rematch clauses, percentage splits, broadcasting rights, but now you've literally got two people that will never ever meet each other in real life having arguments over Instagram about whether Fury deserves the lion's share or not. So can I just speak for everyone when I say no one fucking cares? Let's just get this fight on. Anyway, if it does happen, how do I see it going? I heard a lot of sayings through the time that I spent in boxing, whether it be the one about having a plan until you get punched in the face or waking up in silk pajamas, but the truest saying I ever heard in boxing is that styles make fights. So let me give you an example of styles make fights. In 1993, Lennox Lewis TKOs Frank Bruno. A few fights later, Lewis himself gets stopped by Oliver McCall. But before Lewis has a chance to avenge that defeat, his two former opponents, McCall and Bruno, get it on. So if boxing was black and white, then Bruno, who got stopped by Lennox Lewis, definitely loses to McCall, who stopped Lennox Lewis. But no, that didn't happen. Frank Bruno beat Oliver McCall by decision at Wembley Stadium. And that is the epitome of styles make fights. So you can look at the fact that Alexander Usyk had a hard night's work with Del Boy Chisora, and every time Fury's boxed him, he's boxed the ears off him, and say that that means that Fury easily beats Usyk, but it doesn't. In fact, if you look at Usyk's stance, stature, and style, there's every opportunity we actually see Tyson Fury lose this fight. And this might sound a bit crazy, but I actually believe that Fury's hardest fight recently is when he faced Swedish southpaw Otto Wallin. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering how Otto Wallin was a harder fight than Wilder, who dropped Fury a couple of times, but ultimately, Fury always knew how to beat Wilder. And that's a lot easier said than done because Deontay Wilder is a phenomenal puncher, but during their rivalry, Fury found a couple of ways that he could beat Wilder. However, Fury did really struggle in finding a way to beat Otto Wallin, and that's why when you saw Fury get cut in that fight, being that it could possibly go to the scorecards and he didn't know whether he was ahead or not, you saw Fury throw the kitchen sink at Otto Wallin. And if you look back at Tyson Fury's career, barring Deontay Wilder, only two men as a pro have put Tyson Fury on the canvas. Former cruiserweight champion Steve Cunningham and Canadian heavyweight Nevin Pajic, both of which stand at 6'3", the exact same height as Alexander Usyk. And looking back through Fury's record, it's very hard to argue that barring Vladimir Klitschko, Usyk will be the best name on his resume. And Usyk comes into this fight having gone through every single opponent offered to him. And it's a little bit of a grey area since turning heavyweight because he hasn't really boxed any of the real big names apart from AJ, but you can't really argue that Usyk's got one of the best resumes in world boxing. And for anyone who didn't know, Alexander Usyk is the road warrior, meaning he comes to your back garden and beats you. He beat Glowacki in Poland, he beat Marco Huck in Germany, Michael Hunter in the USA, Bridis in Latvia, Gasayev in Russia before starting his assault on the UK, coming over and beating Bellew, Chisora and AJ all on home soil. So all that being said, surely I'm picking Usyk for this fight. No, I'm going to put my neck on the line here and use another boxing phrase, which is a good big man will always beat a good little man. And despite the fact that Usyk has literally had hundreds of fights, I don't think he's ever boxed a fighter like Tyson Fury. There's somewhat of a myth about Alexander Usyk that he's super slick and defensively he never gets hit, and that's not entirely true. Usyk can be hit and Usyk can be hurt. And in the amateurs, that actually happen quite often. The most high profile out of them would be when he boxed now light heavyweight king Artur Beterbiev and got dropped. I mean, it was a long time ago, but he did even lose to Sean Porter in the amateurs. Usyk and former welterweight champion Sean Porter squared off in an amateur bout in 2006, I think, in Chicago, when onlookers said that Usyk was seriously wobbled by a right hand that Porter landed. And I know what you're thinking here, sort of clutching at straws, and you're right, but that's because Usyk hasn't given us many weaknesses to go on so far. So what is Usyk's biggest weakness? I'm going to say his strength on the inside and his ability to soak up body shots. I've seen Usyk be hurt to the body a few times, and if I've seen it, you can bet that Tyson and Sugar Hill have seen it. You look at the way that Chisora and to a lesser extent AJ were able to impose their physicality upon Usyk, and you can't deny that he does not look as comfortable up close than he does when he's boxing at range. And it's also going to be way easier to draw a reaction out of the likes of Chisora and AJ than it is out of Fury, who offers more when it comes to feints, twitching, footwork. He's just levels above both of those fighters. So I don't see Usyk being as dominant at range as he was against AJ and Chisora. I actually think that this is a fight of two halves. I think that early on Fury's going to test his skill set against Usyk, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has a lot of success in doing so. I very much doubt that the first half of this fight is going to be exciting, and I can see a lot of holding and leaning, putting his weight on Usyk from Fury to try and zap Usyk's energy as the fight goes into the later rounds. And you know what? I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw Usyk land a flash knockdown on Fury, but Fury will get up, and I would very much doubt that Usyk tries to get him out of there. I think that the last 4 rounds is when you see the best of this fight, with Fury changing his tactics and trying to rough Usyk up on the inside. And I don't know whether I just think this Tyson Fury story is a movie or I'm blinded by my admiration for him, but I just keep envisioning Fury stopping Usyk late on the ropes. But listen, I'll cut it short there. I'm sure I'll dive well into this fight in a lot more detail if and when it gets announced. But ultimately, I want to know what you lot think. Who do you think's winning this fight and how? Let me know in the comments.